My fiancée gave me an ultimatum about our wedding, so I broke things off immediately. Hey Reddit. When I first proposed to Rachel, I thought I was the luckiest man alive. She was beautiful, smart, and we had been together for 5 years, building a relationship based on mutual respect and shared dreams, or so I thought. Our engagement felt like the natural progression of our love story, and I was genuinely excited to plan our wedding together. But as the weeks turned into months, cracks began to appear, and I realized that Rachel had very different ideas about our future than I did. It all started innocently enough. Rachel suggested we sit down and start planning the wedding. I was on board, eager to contribute and make it a day we'd both cherish. But as the conversations progressed, I noticed a pattern. Her ideas always took precedence over mine. At first, I brushed it off. She was the bride, after all, and weddings tend to revolve around the bride's vision. I didn't mind compromising on the flower arrangements or the color scheme, but things took a turn when we discussed the guest list. Rachel wanted a grand wedding with over 300 guests. I, on the other hand, preferred something more intimate, with close family and friends. She dismissed my suggestion, saying that a big wedding was non-negotiable. Her family was large, and she wanted to invite everyone she'd ever known, including distant relatives and old co-workers. When I pointed out that we couldn't afford such a large wedding without going into significant debt, she waved me off, saying we'd figure it out later. I started to feel like my opinions didn't matter. The arguments became more frequent. Rachel insisted on hiring a high-end wedding planner who charged an outrageous fee, and she wanted to book an exclusive venue that was way out of our budget. I suggested cutting back in some areas to make it more manageable, but she accused me of being cheap and not caring about her happiness. It hurt to hear that, especially since I'd been saving up for years to give her the engagement ring she wanted and was already stretching my finances thin for the wedding. The breaking point came when Rachel brought up the idea of a destination wedding in Italy. I couldn't believe my ears. We were already struggling to afford a local wedding, and now she wanted to add international flights and accommodations for hundreds of guests to the mix. When I expressed my concerns, she snapped. She told me that if I really loved her, I'd find a way to make it happen. That night, I couldn't sleep. Her words kept echoing in my mind. If you really loved me, was love supposed to come with conditions? Was our relationship only valid if I bent over backward to fulfill her every demand? I felt like I was losing myself in this process, and the person I was supposed to marry didn't seem to care. The final straw came a week later. Rachel sat me down and gave me an ultimatum. Either I agree to all her wedding demands without question, or she'd call off the engagement. She said she didn't want to waste her time on someone who wasn't willing to give her the wedding of her dreams. Her tone was cold, and there was no trace of the warmth and love I used to see in her eyes. I stared at her in disbelief, trying to process what she'd just said. I asked her if she really meant it, if she was willing to throw away our entire relationship over one day. She didn't hesitate. She said she deserved the perfect wedding and wouldn't settle for anything less. In that moment, I realized I couldn't marry someone who valued a single event more than the life we were supposed to build together. I stood up, took off the engagement ring, and placed it on the table. I told her I couldn't do this anymore and walked out the door. The days that followed were a whirlwind of emotions. Part of me felt immense relief, as though a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. But another part of me felt heartbroken. I had envisioned a future with Rachel, and now that future was gone. I confided in my close friends and family, who were shocked but supportive. They told me I had made the right decision and that it was better to find out her true priorities before getting married. Rachel, however, didn't take it well. She bombarded me with texts and calls, alternating between begging me to come back and accusing me of being selfish. She even involved her family, who reached out to me and tried to guilt-trip me into reconciling. They said I was overreacting and that it was normal for brides to be demanding. But I knew deep down that this wasn't just about the wedding. It was about the kind of partnership we would have had if we'd gotten married, and I didn't want to spend my life with someone who didn't respect me or my boundaries. As the weeks turned into months, I began to reflect on our relationship with clearer eyes. Looking back, I realized there had been red flags all along. Rachel had always been a bit controlling, but I had ignored it because I loved her and wanted to make her happy. I had convinced myself that her demanding nature was just part of who she was and that it wasn't a big deal. But the wedding planning brought those issues to the surface in a way I couldn't ignore. One day, I received a package in the mail. It was the engagement ring, along with a note from Rachel. She apologized for everything and said she regretted how things had ended. She admitted that she had been caught up in the idea of a perfect wedding and had lost sight of what really mattered. She asked if we could meet and talk things through. I spent hours debating whether to respond. A part of me missed her and wanted to believe that she had changed, but another part of me was wary. Could I really trust her to put our relationship above her own desires? In the end, I decided not to meet her. I wrote her a letter explaining my decision. I told her that while I appreciated her apology, I couldn't overlook the way she had treated me. I wished her well and hoped she would find happiness, but I knew in my heart that we weren't right for each other. Breaking off the engagement was one of the hardest decisions I've ever had to make, but it was also the best decision for me. It taught me the importance of standing up for myself and not compromising my values for the sake of a relationship. I've since started dating again, and while I'm taking things slow, I feel more confident in what I want and deserve in a partner. Rachel's ultimatum may have been the catalyst for the end of our relationship, but it also opened my eyes to what a healthy, loving partnership should look like. And for that, I'm grateful.